Stop everything and listen. This is not a drill. Do you realize what just happened in Canada could change the rules of business, jobs, and the economy across North America? Imagine 1,200 workers blindsided, factories closing, and the cost of the cars you drive skyrocketing overnight. That's reality right now. And you need to know this. This isn't just about GM or Canada. This is about power accountability and who really calls the shots in a world where corporations have run too long without consequences. Every decision made in boardrooms today ripples directly into your life, your job, your community, your family's future. If you stay with us, you're going to see how Canada just flipped the script on one of the world's biggest automakers, how a 25% tariff is shaking Detroit, and why this may mark the dawn of a new era where governments finally enforce the rules and workers finally gain leverage. It starts here. Canada hits GM with a 25% tariff shock. Market's real. Ingersoll plant closure sparks national economic firestorm. Canada hits GM with 25% tariff shock. Market's real. Ingersoll plant closure sparks national economic firestorm. Stop everything you think you know about corporate impunity and listen carefully, because this is a seismic shift in North American economics. And it's happening right now. General Motors, one of the titans of Detroit, just woke up to a reality they may not have anticipated. For decades, corporations have assumed a kind of invincibility, a capacity to make unilateral decisions, to close plants, to shift production across borders, and to assume governments will bend, subsidize, and absorb the social cost. That assumption has just been shattered in Ontario. The Ingersoll plant, home to the Bright Drop electric delivery van, was abruptly shuttered with no warning. Over 1,200 workers, people who had retooled their lives, retrained for the electric vehicle revolution, and invested years of skill and labor, were suddenly cast into uncertainty. Families, local businesses, and the civic ecosystem that depends on this plant were left dangling, their livelihoods threatened by a distant boardroom's strategic calculus. The closure was not just operational, it was symbolic, a reminder of how fragile local economies can be when a corporate decision ignores its social consequences. Markets reacted immediately. Stocks tumbled, analysts scrambled to recalculate projections. GM's North American strategy, which had seemed inviolable, suddenly collided with the brute force of state authority. And that authority hit with precision. Canada imposed a 25% tariff on GM vehicles imported from the United States. This was not a marginal adjustment. This was a shockwave, a single administrative move that transformed the economic landscape overnight. Cars that once cost $45,000 became unattainable for average Canadians. Entire inventories were rendered non-competitive. The market, which thrives on predictability, felt the floor drop out from under it. Investors didn't just blink. They panicked. And this was no random act. Canada's government, led by Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, had long possessed a legal instrument designed for moments like this. The auto-remission framework. To the casual observer, it sounds like bureaucratic jargon. In reality, it is a scalpel, surgically precise, a rules-based mechanism that ties access to the Canadian market to actual production and labor commitments. If you want to sell here duty free, you must build here, employ local workers, and honor your commitments. GM stepped on that tripwire. The consequences were swift, inevitable, and merciless. To understand the magnitude, consider what this plant represented. Bright Drop was not just a product line. It was a pivot toward the electric future, a bet on the next generation of vehicles. Workers had embraced this shift, retraining from combustion engines to electric vehicle assembly, trusting in the implicit contract that the government and GM would uphold the transition with stability. When the plant closed, it wasn't just a breach of contract. It was a betrayal of trust, a jarring reminder that corporate decisions can extinguish the livelihoods of entire communities with the casual swipe of an executive pen. But Ottawa did not respond with the timid gestures that might have been expected in years past. No letters of regret, no performative press conferences, no quick fix subsidies. Instead, Canada activated its authority in full force. The 25% tariff was not a warning. It was an immediate consequence, a clear message to GM and to every other multinational watching the days of penalty. Free offshoring and right-sizing at the expense of workers are over. The rules of engagement have changed overnight. The market realized this immediately. GM's executives accustomed to the human impact is intense. The 1,200 employees at Ingersoll are now at the center of an economic and political storm. These are people whose lives are intertwined with the plant. Their wages support local merchants, fund schools, and maintain municipal services. The sudden closure sent ripples across the region, leaving families unsure of how to manage mortgages, education costs, and daily necessities. But the leverage has shifted. The risk, which traditionally fell entirely on labor, has now been redistributed. GM must respond, and the clock is ticking. 15 days to present a verifiable production plan, including models, schedules, and integration into the company's broader EV strategy. Fail, and the tariff remains, permanently reshaping GM's market in Canada. Markets don't just react to numbers. They react to clarity, to certainty, to the sudden realization that a long-accepted status quo no longer exists. This 25% tariff is more than an economic instrument. It's a declaration corporate strategy does not override civic responsibility. The lesson is harsh and immediate. For GM, for Detroit, and for every multinational with eyes on Canada. The message is clear. Honor your commitments or face tangible, irreversible consequences. The magnitude of this action cannot be overstated. A single policy mechanism, previously obscure, has reshaped the balance of power between a sovereign nation and a multinational corporation. The political calculus in Ottawa was informed not only by domestic necessity, but by external pressures. The United States' unpredictable trade posture under former leadership made Canada realize that reliance on traditional allies was no longer a guarantee of stability. Canada's government responded not with panic, but with strategic clarity, leveraging both domestic legal tools and emerging international relationships to assert authority. This is a textbook case of consequence in action. GM's assumptions about its freedom to act unilaterally have been shattered. Investors who once expected smooth, predictable corporate operations now confront the reality that national governments can and will enforce rules. Communities, long vulnerable to distant decision-making, are witnessing the possibility that state power can be wielded to protect their livelihoods. The ripple effects extend across the auto sector, with competitors recalibrating strategies, pricing models, and production plans in real time. In essence, this is a reckoning. GM made a calculation based on efficiency and profit, assuming the state would absorb the social cost. Canada refused. The 25% tariff is not just punishment, it is the reassertion of principle. It says that production, labor, and the civic compact are not optional. They are conditions for participation in the market. The financial impact is immediate imported vehicles face price inflation that dramatically alters consumer behavior. Entire segments of GM's inventory are now economically unviable in Canada. Margins, market share, and reputation are all under fire simultaneously. The story unfolding in Ingersoll is not about numbers alone. It is about the collision of corporate mobility and sovereign authority, about the redistribution of risk, and about the reassertion of consequence in a world that has largely ignored it. GM's executives are being forced to confront a reality they have not faced in decades, that the privileges of global capital are not limitless, that the rules of the game can be enforced, and that the lives of workers are no longer entirely negotiable. This moment also highlights a broader shift in the political economy. Canada, a medium-sized nation often perceived as deferential in global markets, just demonstrated that leverage is not only possible, but effective when paired with legal precision and strategic timing. The auto remission framework, long dormant and underestimated, became a weapon of clarity. It is a reminder that institutions matter, that rules, when enforced, have teeth, and that the interplay between labor, capital, and state power can be recalibrated when the political will aligns with strategic opportunity. The markets are still absorbing the shock. Analysts are recalculating GM's exposure. Competitors are reevaluating North American supply chains. Investors are digesting a new reality in which state power, far from being a passive backdrop, can act decisively to enforce commitments. Meanwhile, the people of Ingersoll and surrounding communities are watching closely, understanding that for the first time in years, the risk of economic upheaval is traveling upstream into boardrooms and executive suites. Sovereignty matters, labor matters, and the privilege of doing business in a nation comes with obligations that cannot be casually ignored. GM's closure of the Bright Drop plant was a trigger. The 25% tariff is the consequence. The interplay between corporate strategy and civic responsibility has just been redefined, and the market will never view Canada the same way again. This is breaking news with lasting implications. The Ingersoll plant closure and the tariff shock are more than a headline. They are a case study in accountability, a flashpoint in the ongoing battle between global capital and sovereign authority, and a vivid demonstration of how quickly the rules can change when the state decides to act decisively. Canada has drawn a line. GM must respond, and the consequences for failing to do so are immediate, tangible, and severe. The market is watching, the workers are watching, and the world is witnessing a recalibration that will echo through boardrooms, factory floors, and trade agreements for years to come. Ottawa activates auto remission framework. Detroit panics. 1,200 Canadian workers face sudden corporate betrayal. Canada just pulled a move that shook the foundations of the North American auto industry. GM assumed it could shutter the Ingersoll Bright Drop EV plant without consequence. But the federal government flipped the script by triggering the auto remission framework. Ottawa tied market access to real production commitments, enforcing a 25% tariff on imported GM vehicles. Executives who counted on pliable governments are now scrambling. Workers, communities, and investors